Today we're going to look at an introduction to phone projection with a focus on CarPlay and Android Auto. And looking at the agenda, we'll be covering what phone projection is, types of phone projection, so delving a little deeper, Android Auto and CarPlay, and interoperability testing. So firstly, what is phone projection? In this section, we'll be covering what it is, its purpose, touch a little bit on the history, and user interaction. So what do we mean? Phone projection is so called because it projects a phone's display onto another screen. This could be casting, for example, to a television, or projecting to a vehicle. But in this webinar, we're going to be covering vehicles. In a vehicle, this enables a user to access content through a projecting interface between certified cars and smartphones. And the phone can be controlled from the dashboard, steering wheel, and touchscreen, for example. And some examples of phone projection technologies will be Apple's CarPlay, Google's Android Auto, MirrorLink, and CarLife. But what's the purpose of phone projection? So it's designed to reduce driver distractions by keeping the eyes and hands away from the driver's phone and using the vehicle controls. And the vehicle controls have been specifically designed for use during driving. And it's brought about by connecting a phone to a compatible car. And this gives drivers a means to interact with the phone's apps, use the car's screen, voice actions, and provide a simple way to navigate, listen to media, listen to messages, etc. So what's important here is the content is legible and glanceable. And this can be achieved through things such as a consistent and therefore not confusing UI, large touch targets that are identifiable under all viewing conditions. In other words, simple icons that can be identified at a glance and that are easy to select with minimum distraction and through all driving conditions, night and day. So looking at some of the major phone projection technologies, we won't be covering all of these in detail, but we've got MirrorLink, which I'll talk a little bit more about shortly, appearing in 2012, CarPlay 2010, Android Auto 2015. Mirrorcast was 2012, which is based on Wi-Fi Direct and is really only streaming content rather than full phone projection, and was a precursor to a lot of these technologies. And Baidu's CarLife is based in China. That started in around 2015, and that's a cross-platform solution that supports both CarPlay and Android Auto. As you'll find out, the dominant phone projection technologies, as you're probably aware of, are CarPlay and Android Auto. But looking a little deeper into MirrorLink, first of all, so this was developed by the Car Connectivity Consortium. This was established for phone to car connectivity and includes members such as Apple, BMW, GM, Hyundai, Honda, LG, Panasonic, Samsung, and the VW Group. And from this consortium came the technology called MirrorLink. And this is a standard for controlling handsets from the dashboard or steering wheel. And it enables the consumers or drivers to access certified apps and other contents from a familiar projected interface. They've also more recently developed digital key, which allows a user to access a vehicle using a phone, and the phone itself stores, authenticates and shares digital keys. And this allows, for example, you to access a vehicle using your phone or to give somebody else access to the vehicle with your permission. And you can see there we're now in version 3.0, just came out of that spec. It also ties in with things like Amazon's Key application, which allows people to get Amazon deliveries and placed into a vehicle. So moving on, it's probably worth stating what the interaction principles are for the phone projection. So I've put in bold here, driving safely is the driver's first responsibility, and everything else is secondary to that. So all the design by car makers and app developers have to reflect that priority. But how do we do this? Well, firstly, we need to reduce driver distractions. So the app content and the interaction should complement the driving experience, not fight it, with a simplified UI. And the mantra really should be eyes on the road and hands on the wheel. And I've bolded that here as well because that's important. But how do we achieve eyes on the road and hands on the wheel? So firstly, we need to reduce driver distractions. So app content and interaction should complement the driving experience. We need to make sure that the information is current and glanceable, which gives you the eyes on the road. That's by conveying tasks, different states at a glance, and allows quick responses with timely and accurate driving information. We encourage hands-on driving, which is the hands on the wheel. So we try and restrict to one-handed gestures or ideally hands-free speech with simplified interactions. And then finally, we prioritize the driving tasks and discourage distraction. That's done by the driver controlling the pace, prioritizing driving-related tasks. So non-driving content has to be considered very carefully, and we prioritize sound and adjust the volume for driving tasks. And lastly, to avoid hazardous or distracting activities, we remove any irrelevant movement. So let's look a little deeper into the phone projection elements themselves. In this section, we'll look at the connection, display, functionality, and ways to interact. Firstly, connection. So here we've got a high-level view into how a phone connects to a car kit. So although Teledyne covers this to a much finer detail, the specifications and the protocols are proprietary, and they have restricted access, so I can't really share those in this webinar, but those can be available to certain customers when we're doing the testing. That being said, I can talk at a high level on stuff that's obviously in the public domain. One of the main connection methods, as people are probably aware of, is wired, and that's through a USB port in the vehicle. In the chart on the right, you can see we've got the car kit and the phone, and the car kit also incorporates a phone projection module supplied by the phone manufacturer and allows the phone to communicate with certain things through the car kit. And when the phone's plugged into the car, the USB is connected, and once verified that the device that's plugged in supports phone projection, there's a USB roll switch, so that means the phone becomes the master of the USB bus. And then the transport protocols are set up, and once authentication is achieved, the traffic is encrypted. So you've got the control protocol. You may have Bluetooth set up and the screen can be streamed, and then you've got input and output data being exchanged. So obviously sounds, for example, coming from the phone to the car kit, and key presses coming from the car kit back to the phone. The other way that a phone can connect is wirelessly, and that's done using Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. Usually the preferred option is using 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, so as you're not interfering with the Bluetooth, which is operating at 2.4 gig. And for a typical connection, we'll start with a Bluetooth connection, and the Wi-Fi credentials may be shared over that Bluetooth connection. The phone can then connect to the car kit's Wi-Fi, and that connection set up, and from there it follows a similar path to the wired connection. So you set up the transport, the authentication, and then you have the video stream for the screen display and input and output traffic between the phone and the car kit. So the main functionality or exchange of information for phone projection is usually navigation and location information, audio, so that's playing music content from the phone or streaming content from the phone functionality, so that's making, answering calls, and messaging, so that's reading and replying to messages received on the phone. So that's the content supported on the phone, but the user needs a way to control that information. That's what we talk about by the interaction part. And again, in effect here, what we're trying to do is extend the phone. So we're extending the phone's input to the car kit. And to do this, the main input is usually through the touch screen, but some cars may also include rotary dials, touchpads, which allow scrolling through and selection of menu options. And of course, steering wheel controls can also be used. And finally, phone projection technologies are trying to push to voice control as much as possible, as that follows a principle, if you remember, of eyes on the road and hands on the wheel. So we'll now look a little deeper into Android Auto and CarPlay and start with Android Auto. This section will touch upon a little bit of the history, the elements of Android Auto, and go into detail a little bit on apps. So firstly, a very brief history. Google I/O event in 2014, the Open Auto Alliance was announced, and this included the companies here, Audi, GM, Google, of course, Honda, Hyundai, NVIDIA, and it also introduced what was called GAL, which was the Google Automotive Link. Then Android Auto was released in 2015, and Android Auto as an app in 2016. And from then on, it was improvements with the UI rework in 2019. And then this was followed then by expansion into a further 36 countries in December last year. And then it was only April this year that countries such as Belgium and the Scandinavian countries and Portugal were added. Looking at the visual side of Android Auto, you can see there it supports 3 resolutions, 480, 720, and 1080p. The font that's used for the large text is Google Sans, and their standard view is given at the top picture there. And they've also introduced a widescreen option to allow for a more detailed information view. And this is in the right of the bottom picture. You can see there you've got the turn-by-turn navigation, even though you're looking at the apps. And then looking in more detail at the system UI, that's split into 3 parts. So you've got the status bar at the top, the main app content area in the center, and the nav bar or navigation bar at the bottom. And that includes the Google Assistant, which is shown by the microphone icon at the bottom right. So looking at the status bar at the top, that contains things like the clock, weather, which can be switched on and off, connectivity status of Wi-Fi and cell connectivity, and battery level of the phone that's connected. And in the app content area are the suggested apps. You can see the top row there. Then below that, you've got the scrollable app grid to allow you to navigate to your apps. And within that, you can see there as well an exit option, and that may be replaced by a car OEM's mark. Looking next at the notifications, these consist of notification center cards, and they can either be pop-ups if you're on a screen. They can contain immediate actions, such as if a call comes in, an option to answer or decline that incoming call in the pop-up. You have navigation notification if you're not on the map screen, so your turn-by-turn navigation. Could be a incoming phone call or messages or other things such as media or reminders. And the user can also, by hitting the bell icon in the nav bar, go to the notification center, and that will show a list of the notification cards. And that allows the ability, for example, again, in each of those cards to play a message directly from the notification card in the list. So Android Auto also includes on the navbar widget. So for example, the dialer, which is shown in the top picture. Navigation, that's the next picture down on the right. And the media controls, so there's 3 examples there for Spotify, podcast, and YouTube Music. And they have action buttons in that. So you can, for example, control an app that's in the background. So you can have media control if you've got music playing, while the map view is in the main app window, or vice versa. Now, Android Auto also allows for custom apps to be supported, and they have certain recommendations for that. The first of these is to use a simple flat hierarchy. So you don't want your driver to have to remember how to navigate through an app. They don't want to remember how to do that because that would be distracting. The primary app screen, that's used for the essential functions, and the drawer can be used to access secondary information. And the app shouldn't include all the features used in the phone app or web app, just the important features need to be prominent. It needs to be easy to use, but you can also have functionality in the app, in the phone projection, doesn't actually appear in the app or the website if that's going to aid the phone projection app. So that was Android Auto.